Hello and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Today I am joined by Vince Skillcorn. Hello Vince, how's it going?
Hey, you're right.
Usually I like to start the podcast off by giving you the chance to sort of introduce yourself and explain your judo journey.
Yeah, okay. So I guess like many, my judo career started when I was 5 in the UK, just at a local community centre. For me, I actually just fell in love with judo straight away. Like I couldn't believe the fact that I could basically have a fight with people and not get told off. So for me, from the beginning, it was like a real it was just really good. I had a lot of energy as a kid, and yeah, it was just one of those things. And once I started, I think I pretty much just forgot to stop. Like I fought internationally for Great Britain from the age of 11 all the way through to senior. But yeah, that's pretty much how I started. Obviously, we done judo when we were younger together. But yeah, I moved to Camberley when I was 17 to do judo full time. And yeah, but I really wanted to make it to the top level. But I ended up with a string of injuries, and it just never really happened for me. So I actually retired quite young. I retired at 24. So that's sort of, my very brief introduction to judo, I guess.
And how old were you when you started?
Yeah, so as I said, I was 5 years old when I got going. But yeah, I was straight into competitions as soon as I was old enough. I pretty much trained every single day. If I couldn't get there with my mum and dad taking me to training, as I got a bit older, I'd sometimes run to sessions. And yeah, I just loved everything about judo, to be honest.
Yeah, as you said, we competed against each other. I think at 81s for a while. As maybe I think we were juniors by the time we were the same weight.
Juniors at that point. Yeah, it was one of those. So I think we had just moved out of cadets. We were in juniors, and you actually went to the junior worlds over me, didn't you? So I think we had a good string of tournaments together. But after that, actually, that's when I moved down to 73 kilos after that period.
Yeah, and I remember, I think you got selected to go to Cuba for that training camp.
Yeah, Cuba was good. That was interesting, Cuba. Yeah.
And then obviously, so you progressed up into the senior levels, string of injuries, retired from competitive judo, but obviously stuck around in judo. And did you transition straight into coaching at that point, or how did that all work?
Well, when I was full-time at Camberley, there wasn't we used to have jobs during training, or at least in between training, I should say. So I was working at a golf club during the week, and it was real rubbish money. It was just terrible. And I started getting up a few private one-to-one coaching clients. And then I quickly realized I only needed sort of 4 or 5 private clients to be able to earn exactly the same money as I was working at the golf club for doing 20, 25 hours a week. So that sort of started my coaching. And then I started coaching the Camberley juniors as well, and going straight through my coaching badges whilst I was still training. It was one of those things, I always wanted to do elite judo, but for some reason I knew I just wasn't going to get there. But I didn't want to leave judo. I feel like judo still had a lot to offer, and I still wanted to do more within judo. So I went straight into coaching as soon as I retired, mostly at Camberley Judo Club to start with. And to be fair, Camberley was the one place. Luke Preston, the head coach there, he really supported my journey into coaching. He gave me the freedom to make mistakes and sort of find my identity within coaching. So he sort of really helped me grow into that role quite quickly.
And then you say when you talk about finding your identity as a coach, what does that look like to you now? How would you describe your coaching style, maybe?
Well, it's different. I mean, I think the difficulty is, and I was literally having this conversation with somebody the other day about how we use the word coach and coaching. And I think to everyone, it means something slightly different. And especially when we talk about careers in coaching as well, generally, most probably would think elite level judo. But For me, coaching and being a coach is the same as being a teacher. So you have each element of coaching will require a different skill set. The thing that we're teaching is judo, but actually the delivery is coaching, how we get things across. So I think it really changes dependent on what group we're actually working with. So sort of an easy analogy I think of is like, we wouldn't ask a university lecturer to start teaching like a 5-year-old how to do basic maths. You know, they would obviously know the content, but how to deliver it would be entirely different to how you deliver like a really complex maths theory in a university. So, but we sort of think about coaching as we train as a coach. You're given this broad spectrum of skills, but actually the important stuff of delivery and how it's delivered and how things are changed and what things you take into consideration when you're actually trying to explain things, I think they're completely different. And I think when I very first started out coaching, I was really fortunate. I was working with a group that was sort of 11 to 13, 11 to 14. And it worked really well for my coaching style at that time. It was very direct. I had an idea, I had a vision, I wanted to really do it. And I wanted things done. And at the time, I was very lucky. And I'm sure Luke would have seen many mistakes I was making at the time. But he sort of allowed me to grow into that. And then once I started going through the different coaching levels and badges and stuff and sort of just map time experience as well, I think that's one of the things that's really missing. Like in a year, I think I could be coaching, well, say, for example, at the moment, I do 25 classes a week as a minimum. So if you imagine that over a year, and that's teaching lots of different levels, how quickly that volume comes up, which allows me to make mistakes, but also learn from them very, very quickly. I think a lot of coaches will do, a couple of classes a week, and that'll be it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my starting point. Now I'm very much, what is the bigger picture? What is the long-term goal? And that's sort of my consideration now. And what is the group that I'm working with? What are their aims? What are their goals within those sessions, I guess?
Do you find yourself trying to guide the kids towards the goals that you think they should have sometimes for your coaching?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think as the expert in the room, you've got a goal of, this is the sort of learning of, for us, it's judo. So we have targets of what we would want them to learn. But I think regardless, the objective pretty much all the time is to help people love the sport, especially like when they walk through the door as a nervous 5-year-old or a nervous teenager or a nervous adult trying judo for the first time. The only real objective is to help them fall in love with the martial art, with the sport, with what we fell in love with, but also to understand the motivations why you start something isn't necessarily the motivations why you continue doing something. And I think as people who have been involved in judo as long as we have, it's very difficult to remember that first walk through the door, that first step. And we've got to try and empathize as best we can with those people coming through the door. But the objective is just to get them to love the sport. Once they love it, then they'll learn it and understand it. But as a pure on the map, the stuff that's taught, as the person in charge, you will obviously direct them through that. But yeah, I think the objective's the same regardless.
And when you say you're coaching 25 sessions a week at your club or your clubs, and what kind of range are you looking at there in terms of age and abilities?
Yeah, so at our club, we teach from 3 years old all the way up to adults. So our club's Fitness Judo, and I don't teach the youngest, so I don't teach the 3 and 4 year olds, but I teach from 5 all the way through to the adults. And we're relatively a new club, so we've been open 7 years, and 2 of those obviously were during a pandemic. So we're relatively new. So we've got a big group of members now, but most are sort of beginners and lower level. We've got a few higher level people that I work with. So I've got a few people on the British junior team that I work with, but on the whole, they're younger. So our competition team, they're all aged around 9 and 10, and they're sort of working through. So in the next 3 to 4 years, we'll have quite a large competition group that are going out around the country, but they're all still quite young at the moment. So I have a broad spectrum. When I was working with Luke at Camberley, I was working with the teenage section mostly, but then I would also help him with the elite team, which was a really good experience as well. Kept me interested in sort of pushing my technical side, and from a tactical technical level, that's sort of where my judo really progressed. But actually fundamental grassroots coaching really helped my understanding of what judo was about, really, or on the larger scale.
Yeah, it's something I say. I sort of joke about with some of the people at the club is I've learned more about judo in the past 3 or 4 years when I've been doing a lot more coaching than, you know, the 20, 21 years before that when I was competing.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? It's completely different. I think that's the thing. When you're an athlete, it's all about you. It doesn't really matter what the group is. All you need is training bodies. You need people to get you onto flights and stuff. But you know, you're the one who's fighting, and sort of anything else is irrelevant if it doesn't suit your fighting style. If it doesn't suit your fighting pattern, it's sort of it's just a bit of noise you don't need. But when it comes to coaching, it completely flips. Like, you have to change about what is best for the group of people in front of you, which means you have to learn more about judo, because depending on size, shape, ability, they're going to need different skills. So you actually then have to become a lot more rounded as a coach.
Yeah, I think to a point you made earlier about the difference teaching and coaching, you've got to be able to understand, or from what I've experienced, you've got to be able to understand it from a variety of different angles, because you would explain it one way and say 80% of the class will go, right, I understand that, and they'll go off. And then out of that 20% are still looking at you confused, you've got to change how you explain it. And then another 10% will get it. You've got to explain the same point a variety of different ways so the whole class can fully understand what you're trying to trying to teach them. So it's not just about understanding it as well as how you understand it.
Yeah, and I think that's completely right. And I think we make some mistakes here when we're coaching, like, as a group. I think there must be a real true distinction between learning and understanding. So when you stand on a mat and you teach a technique, that for me is, as you said, most of the group will learn that technique. They'll go on, they'll be able to replicate it, they'll be able to do it in the instance that you're showing. And the way you deliver that is by making it, make them think about it in a way that they can, because judo is a bit abstract. It's not like kicking a football. It's so different. So that's one part, but they only truly understand it once there's context. So, for example, when you're teaching a certain technique or how to stop a certain technique, it's only when they're actually doing randorian fighting and competition. And generally, it's only when they lose that they actually go, oh, that makes sense now. And that's one of the keys between teaching, like, so someone learns something and actually create an understanding. So I think that's a huge part. And I think the first thing you need to do is teach something, let them learn a technique, but then also offer the opportunities for them to actually do it and then create understanding around it. So it's one thing learning it, but actually creating the context and understanding around it. That's the real hard thing as a coach to do, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I took a group of kids, I had 24 kids compete at the weekend a couple of days ago. There was a group, so we're getting wide all the way from like 6, so they started competing a 6-year-old out here in Australia, and right through to, I think, 12 or 13 may have been the oldest I had in my group. And a lot of the kids, there was more than half of them, it was their first competition. And they go out to varying degrees of, they all fought really well, but, varying degrees of sort of winning, losing. And I remember one kid came off and he was all excited. He went out there and he just froze in the middle of the mat and he got thrown. He comes back and I could feel I had my hand on his collar and his jacket, and I could feel his heart beating out of his chest. And I was like, well, you see, it's a bit different than at the club, right? He's like, yeah. And I was like, you've done your first one. That's a hard one. And, on to the next. And he went out and fought, like he'd loosened up a little bit and relaxed and fought much better. But I saw the difference. So tonight was the first session after the competition at the club, and I could just see it was slightly different how some of them were behaving in the randori, and they just sort of understood it a little. That context, they were like, "All right, I get it. They've stepped out of the club, doing randori with the mates, and they've actually gone into a situation, new people." Under that pressure, and they've gone, okay, right, even that sort of 8 and 9 year olds, or even like the 6 year olds, you can just see that they just sort of understand it a little bit better now.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why competition is so important as a group. Like I've talked before about how not every person that does judo wants to do competition to like a high level, and I think that's really, really important. But I think actually competition is so important for developing players and developing understanding around it. And like competition 101, like the first thing you do with a new competition group, you would teach the basic idea of get 2 hands on, don't walk forwards, and bring them to you, which is like such a simple instruction. But the amount of new people starting competitions that bow, run at their partner, and their partner just turns him Sianagi and throws him frip on, and the competition's over in 2 seconds. And it's only at that instance when they're getting up do they sort of realize, well, actually, if I just got 2 hands on and pulled him, he wouldn't have been able to do that to me. And I think that's the lessons of creating the understanding. So I think competition's a really valuable tool, and something that actually judo has as a martial art that's really, really makes it really effective as well, is those learning experiences that actually make the difference, a real cause and consequence to either not concentrating or not listening or not doing as you should do.
Yeah, well, I've again, it's a joke I've made about in relation to mindfulness and judo. Like, if you're at judo and you're not concentrating, you get thrown and you get whacked over pretty hard, and you sort of get, oh, hang on, I should be thinking about the task at hand, not worrying about some issue, or it makes you very. I feel as though it makes you very present. If you were sat there meditating, every time your mind drifted off, someone just whacked you on the back of the head, you'd concentrate a lot faster.
Yeah, I think you would. I'm not sure we'd be allowed to do it as coaches, though.
Yeah, I don't know where the ethical line is drawn there, but yeah, I really agree with your point there. I'm taking a group of seniors to another competition, Q grade competition this weekend. I've got a large group of first timers in that cohort as well. And like I say to any of them, if you don't have to want to do a competition, but I recommend doing at least one of them just to give you that experience, so you understand the full depth of the sport, really. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is, to a large degree. What it is now is a competition sport, right?
Well, I think so as well, and I think especially going back to kids, one of the things, like judo is great at building confidence and empowering people, and I think for me, one of the things I try and relate to the kids from a very early age is the fact that they are a lot more capable than what they give themselves credit for. I think we're in a society that actually is generally about keeping people down, like, they're trying to keep people within their lanes. And actually, for me, I think people are a lot more capable than we give them credit for. And I think by them doing their first competition and realizing like they're not made out of glass, they're very capable. Yes, they got extremely nervous. Yes, they might have lost, but actually they were on the mat and they're now doing something that most of their friendship group are not doing. Like I used to always think that, like when I was a kid, it's like when we used to be training 4 or 5 times a week, we'd jump on a bus, and we're talking like age of 12, 13, you'd jump at a bus at like 2 o'clock in the morning from the services, you'd drive all the way into Europe, you'd fight all weekend, you'd get back at stupid o'clock on Monday morning, you'd then go into school the next morning, and all your mates had just bummed around in the park all week. And it just gave me so much more confidence. And I feel like that actually it's something really undervalued as a martial art that we do really well. We give opportunities for people to actually go and grow and be stronger. And I think judo for me has just given me so much more confidence and belief in what can be done.
Yeah, it's only once I grew up and I realized how, not ridiculous, but how much opportunity we had, doing those trips and going to Europe and, bus driving over to Holland and the sort of the fun on those bus trips. You try and explain to people now and they're like, look at you, like, you're talking a different language, and they didn't have those experiences as a kid. And you don't take it for granted, but you just don't realize as a kid like how different it was that we were, like you say, it was like monthly, if not even more frequently, that we were going over to Europe. 40, 50, 60 lads on a coach or two, and fighting. And sometimes I don't know, I'm sure you'll have done this. You do one competition on a Saturday, and then on the way back up through England, you do another one on the way home. And it was just sort of normal to do that. And you talk to people like, I talk to people now, and as an adult, and they just had nothing like that as a child.
Yeah, and obviously, like now looking back, you see there was quite a lot of mistakes actually made, not through ill intentions, just through lack of knowledge at that point. There were many things that were not optimum, but I don't look back at any of those things as a bad thing. I just think they were just different, and that information now helps me. That sort of helps me understand how I can be a better coach, how I can help people more. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I just loved fighting when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, so our parents took me and my little brother. They were sick of us fighting in the house, and they were like, right, let's take you somewhere where you can do that with some level of boundaries, but still allowed us to exercise that sort of nature and within us. Well, that's something I like. But with my kids, I mean, I don't know what your view is on this, so I'd be interested to know. But with my kids, so I start sort of at 3 or 4 as well, coaching, and I get them doing randori, not standing, mainly on the ground. And I get them wrestling straight away. And I've had this conversation with other coaches here where they don't get the kids doing randori until they're sort of 8, 9, or 10. And to me, that just seems not far too old, obviously, but like if the kids are around doing judo, for me, they've come to this sport because they want to have a wrestle. They want to have a roll around the rough and tumble. So I try and give that to them pretty almost straight away.
Yeah, I'm keen on getting them doing it as quickly as possible, because I think judo has a massive advantage over other, so say for example something like rugby in this country. There's no contact. My boys are 5 and 6, and they just do tag rugby because they understand the issues of tackling and stuff like that. Judo, from day one, you learn how to fall. And the whole thing about judo is respect. And I don't think you fully understand that respect until you add randori into the mix. We have parents ask us, is judo a good martial art? Is it good for self-defense for kids? And I say, well, actually, it's one of the best for kids when it comes to self-defense and martial arts. But it's also one of the best for helping with control, discipline, because from day one, they understand cause and effect. If you do a martial art where you do, say, kicking and punching mitts, for example, you train kick in the air or punch in the air, and then you use mitts, because obviously you can't kick someone full contact. So there's no real understanding of what might happen if you hit someone or if you kick someone. With judo, there's a very clear thing. If you get hold of someone and you throw them to the floor, they can feel that straight away. You get thrown to the floor, you feel that, you understand within the world how that actually interacts. And for me, that's what gives kids the understanding. Like my boys, obviously, they've been around judo since they were born, and they go onto the mat. They have a wrestle. They understand. Even at home, obviously, they'll have a bit of a wrestle in that, but they fully understand if they go too far, it's going to hurt them. They're going to do something wrong. They're going to get they actually have more control now because they understand what they're capable of and what the outcome of any action will be.
I suppose that's one that maybe not unique, but it's definitely rare in terms of a lot of the other combat sports. With judo, you can practice it to 100% of the what the sport allows.
Yeah, and I will add the caveat as well. Like with the young ones, we don't do like hours of randori. We will only do sort of 10 minutes of randori at most. Like it's not like a full session, because I think you still need to learn body control, movement, twist and turn. Actually, to get better at randori, they need to learn how to control their body more. So actually, yeah, it is in there, but that's not the focus of the session, like I'm sure many people would be.
It was so with the little kids, the tiny tots, we do. So what I'll do is maybe 2 or 3 rounds of groundwork randori, And you can sort of see, it might be like a minute and a half per round. Nothing, not too long. And then you can sort of see them getting a little bit sort of, I don't know, like losing interest a little bit, and they don't quite get it. They're just rolling, they just end up sort of rolling around and stuff, and they're not really sure what's going on. But then I'll start playing champion of the mat. So I'll put them on the crash mat, and they got to push each other off the crash mat. And once you just change the goal, it's amazing how much harder they will sort of fight each other. Where 30 seconds before, when they're just trying to, and you can't, it's hard to explain the rules, I think, of judo to a kid. I mean, it's pretty hard as an adult to understand them sometimes. But, the concept of holding someone down and trying to escape when you're being held down. But then as soon as you got to push them off a crash mat, the kids come alive.
So I think with that, actually, I think I hear people all the time saying about, judo's too complicated, the rules need to be checked, like all these rule change stuff. But I actually think like judo is super simple. All you need to do is throw someone on the back, and once they're on the back, keep them there. Like, I think we try and make too many obstacles and create too many excuses. Like, how many people know all the rules of rugby, or all the rules of football, or all the rules of Formula One, or all the rules of golf? Like, nobody does, but they understand the concept of what it is. You don't need, our jobs as coaches and people who run clubs is to make the whole process as simple as possible, make it as easy as possible. Because we're on the back foot. It is when somebody comes through the door, they're coming in, looking at people wearing pajamas, and there's like Japanese words. So if we break it down to the fact that, we've got judo suits on, there's only 3 words that any beginner needs to know: hajime, mate, and rei. Every other word is irrelevant. After that point, they learn the idea of judo, which is to hold somebody down from to the floor and hold them down onto there. And if you can do that, you score an ippon. That's it, game over. I think once we start actually stop making get over ourselves, like judo is extremely hard at high level, and understand all the concepts is really, really hard. But they don't need to, that's all irrelevant when you want to fall in love with the sport, I think, and the martial art.
Yeah, we do like to overcomplicate things sometimes. I think it's,
it's just I just think when I'm looking around at everything else, you got football fit. Our job isn't to put up barriers for people entering judo. Our job is to make it as simple as it can be for somebody to do judo. And we're only doing, I think it's only for ourselves, like making it harder so we seem like we're really clever or whatever. We've done years of training. It's not that important. Get them on the mat, get them moving around, and get them understanding the basics. And then they'll the more they love it, the more they'll want to learn. And that's why I keep on stressing about it. Just get them to fall in love with the sport. Don't try and don't try and make it too complicated.
I think this is actually quite a nice little segue into one of the reasons why we got this podcast organised. They've not been trying to do it for about a year now, but in terms of I think you were busy, and then I was in lockdown, and then I've been busy, and you were in lockdown, and it's just been we just kept missing each other. But you put a post up the other day I saw on your Instagram, and related to an issue with finding good coaches. And that was something I sort of wanted to talk to you about. This is a conversation I've had with people out here, and I really enjoyed your perspective on that post. But why do you think we're struggling to find good coaches?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think part of it is what I talked about earlier, as we look at coaching in purely as an elite thing. But I think also we don't particularly see it as a career option, because what most, what it was like when we were 15, 16, 17, and you're doing judo at a decent level, you sort of have to make a choice at that stage, and you have to go, right, I either want to go full time like I did. For me, I didn't particularly buy in school. I wasn't really that interested in school, and judo for me was the one thing I was really interested in. So for me, as soon as I left school, I went full time, done judo. Or you make the decision that you go to university. But at no point is there a conversation around, this could be a career opportunity for you. Like if, for example, you go into full-time judo and you give it your best shot, we'll get you through your coaching badges, so you're experiencing that, you're learning. But at the end of it, if something doesn't happen, if you don't reach the level you want, you've always got coaching. You can always go in. And I think my post as well wasn't to say necessarily there wasn't any good coaches, because I think they are. I think there are lots of good coaches. I think there's just not availability for, there's not a mindset or the culture that actually people believe that it can be their career or their opportunity. Like most coaches will work all day and then go and coach as something that they do in the evening. And I feel like actually, if we had those good coaches with the ability to focus their time just on coaching and increase their hours of coaching from 3 to 5 hours a week to 20 to 25 hours a week, the actual level of judo would improve as well. You know, if they're now focused on being on the mat, delivering judo classes 5 nights a week, it can only improve. And there's about that accountability as well. Like if you're just a volunteer coach and you're just if you miss a session, you're volunteering to do it. It doesn't really matter. If you're employed by a club, no, you have to be there. You have to get the club open. You have to be reliable. You have to do those things. And I think it's just part of the culture that needs to be shifted quite dramatically. I feel like we need to be encouraging and teaching people how to operate clubs on a full-time basis. Like it's such a common thing, like, oh, there's a BJJ club down the road, there's a martial arts club down the road, their mats are full, they're charging 40, 50 pounds a month. We're only charging £2-3 a night, but we've only got 20 members, they've got 400 members. So there's a clear distinction between that. It's not price. Price isn't what people are concerned about. It's about the fact that they can host classes at the right time every single night of the week, and they can advertise. For me, that's where it needs to be. And we need to be moving towards getting to a point where we can say to people, you can have a career, you can have a job. So we're just, so Sam and I, Sam's my wife, we run our club and we're just putting together like a package. So we're going to be opening up a full-time coaching role at our club, which is going to be based around 25 grand a year for 30 hours of work a week. And that's going to be our starting salary. So we're trying to get into a position where we can properly professionalize it and be able to offer the services for people to do it. And I think that for judo to really succeed, if we really want judo to improve, that's the way we've got to go. We've got to open up more centers. We've got to get more people doing judo and create more opportunities for people to earn a living from it.
Do you see it as another area where people are just making it overcomplicated and putting those barriers in the way unnecessarily? And actually, it's potentially a really easy fix.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so the reason why I'm so passionate, obviously Sam and I started our club and it was our sole source of income. And then COVID hit, and then we lost the whole of our school's business, which was like 400 or 500 kids doing judo every term. And then we lost 100 members from our club. So we had about 275 members within our club. We lost 100 of those during the lockdowns. And then we lost the whole school side of the business as well. And we were just sat there thinking, we've put all our life into judo. We started judo at 5. We pushed, we've done everything we can. And this global pandemic now is going to possibly crush us. So we looked into judo and there was just nobody doing anything. So all of the clubs, not all of the clubs, that's actually quite unfair. There were people doing stuff online, but the majority of clubs just said, well, you can't do judo online. We shut down. That's it. So then we started looking at martial arts clubs, BJJ clubs, and started looking at the difference. And their narrative was completely different to that of judo. They mobilized so quickly. Like in Britain, we've got a few really big martial arts franchises. And I was watching what they were doing. They had literally set up online within days. And we were quite fortunate, actually, because it was our only source of income. We had actually set up before we went into lockdown because we started losing some of our venues. So we actually went straight online. I had no idea what I was doing. It was just something that we'd done. But we started looking at outside of judo for inspiration. And I was looking at these academies and they were set up and they had like 300-400 members. They were charging a lot of money. I was just thinking, well, I know judo is as good as this. I know judo is, and judo should be growing. Like one franchise, it was nearly the size of the whole of British judo. And this is one, And it just blew my mind. I was just thinking, well, we've got to change what we think is possible, because people want to do martial arts, people want to be involved. And these academies as well, they were growing in lockdown. So online, they were actually growing, whereas we were trying to sort of stem the hemorrhage of losing so many members. We were trying to do loads of different things. They actually got to a point where they had started growing again. So then at that point, that's when I started looking at it, thinking, well, what are they actually doing? How are they doing this? What are the processes that they got? And what can we learn? And then that was it. Sam and I just literally, when we weren't teaching online, we were researching these companies. We were looking at them. What are their models? What are they doing? How do they get somebody through the door? How do they make it so professional? Like one of the clubs, which was just one club, their dojo was 9,000 square foot, and it was a commercial club. And like, for example, on costing, our club, we've got a full-time dojo, which is just 1,600 square feet. And that costs us close to 30 grand a year to run. So this place has got a humongous dojo. And it was just about changing what we thought. And I just think, well, if they're able to do that and they haven't got a governing body and they're not funded, they're not given millions by UK Sport or anything like that, we must be able to tap into this as a martial art and as a sport. And if we do, it will only benefit judo and the longevity of it. So that's sort of the reason why I got so passionate about it. And I said, Sam and I invested a lot of money into our own. When we were losing so much money, we invested a lot of money into our education around it, how a business is run, what systems are in place, how do you automate? Because it's fine if you've got 50 people in your club and you're able to go through the paperwork, but what happens when you've got 1,000? So we're nearly at 500 members, and actually as a point of management, that's quite a lot. So we've got Sam and myself, we've got 2 part-time coaches that help us, and then we've got an assistant manager. But actually, you actually need a lot of automations and systems in place to be able to manage that many members also.
In terms of you say there about the attitude needing to change, because it's a similar attitude here in Australia that I've experienced. And even people with full-time judo clubs, I know, still aren't, like, it's weird, like they have a full-time center, but they still don't seem to buy into the idea of the fact that judo can operate in a full-time center. They have other things going on as well, right? And it's as if they're still not convinced, even though they have one. And from things I've seen, in terms of people in America, I know this is something that I think Jimmy Pedro pushes really hard. Is trying to change its narrative of how we view it. But it seems quite prevalent. Obviously, it's in all these different corners of the world. What do you think is going to be? What do you think it's going to take? To get a large scale shift in perception that judo could be something bigger than what it is. Well, it already is bigger than what it is, but like get people to realize that.
I suppose there's a few different ways of looking at it. I think people will look at, there will be some people who just won't want to change. Like Sam and I have done a presentation for British Judo actually on this subject about professionalizing clubs. And there was just some people in the room that just didn't want to know. All right. And it's not for them, but there's going to be so many people our age that invested so much time, effort, and even older, there's going to be loads of people that are wondering what's next for judo. Maybe they're in a job that they don't particularly like and they would love to be able to do judo. Maybe they just need a little bit of help. And that's part of the reasons why I've been doing so many posts now. And that's one of the reasons why I'm on it, because they just need a nudge, a little idea of how it could be done. But whether you see success in judo as winning medals, whether you see it as having a lot of members, whether you see it as earning a certain amount of income, if they're your 3 metrics, and as clubs, they start, say, for example, our aim is to try and get to 1,000 members, okay, pretty quickly. Once we get 1,000 members, if we have 10% of that 1,000 members as a competition team, which is roughly what our split is for the guys that do competitions outside of the club to the ones that don't, you've then got 100 kids doing competitions, and then you're turning up to tournaments with 100 kids. Then, because of the amount of judo, because you're able to offer them a full-time program, around their schooling and stuff, they're going to start winning more medals. You're going to start having more people wanting to come to your club. Your growth is good. And at some point, whatever they measure their level of success is, it's going to be very hard to ignore. And you can continue do it running the clubs how it's always been run, but there will be this shift. And I feel it's on the verge of coming. I think it's almost like COVID has sort of like sped it up a little bit. But I think coaches will soon see, like, a career in coaching was pretty much trying to be a British judo coach or an England coach, but that's not how it has to be. People can be full-time coaches working in clubs, stuff like that. And I think that's going to be where it is. And I think it's too easy to sort of undervalue what judo does. I know from my own experience, judo has transformed my life. I'm in a completely different place now to where I was when I was a kid, and that's helped me. And because I know how good it is, why wouldn't I want 1,000 kids benefiting from what judo can offer? Why wouldn't I want 10,000 kids benefiting? So the more we understand what we're doing and how we're promoting it, it's almost, for me, I think it's insulting that somebody doesn't want more people doing judo. I think you want to hold this back and not give it to as many people as possible. When, everyone can benefit from judo in some form, whatever form that is, whether it's doing competitions, whether it's getting fitter, stronger, self-defense, whether we just look at it, the narrative is too much around Olympic judo rather than the whole sport, what it is, how we do it.
What level of coach do you hold? What qualification level?
So I've got a master's degree now in advanced sports performance coaching. So as I said, when I finished judo, I'd already had my level 2, but I went straight into level 3, and then I sort of didn't have anywhere to go. But I didn't have any education apart from like a couple of GCSEs and that. So at the end of level 3, they opened up this British Judo opened up this master's degree, and I was really fortunate that actually there was a couple of people within British Judo that supported me through it. So Joyce Heron and Colin McIver actually really pushed me through, and Luke, as I said, he was fundamental really in pushing me in my coaching, so that he also pushed me towards that. And I was fortunate that they took my level of coaching as a foundation degree, and that opened my eyes up to, when I was doing that, the sort of bigger picture of the science behind things. And it also helped create a lot more understanding of potentially why my judo career didn't go the way it should have done, or the way I would have wished, at least, especially with lots of injuries and stuff like that. And it just helped put a lot of things that I thought into a nice, clear vision. But there's a point as well, like, unless learning all that stuff was good for me because I'd never done it, but unless you can apply it in real terms, like day to day on the mat, like, there's lots of things I learned that were really interesting, really useful in understanding stuff, but day to day on a coaching basis, just you can't implement them. And in the bigger picture, well, what's the value in it anyway? So there was lots of things that I learned that was really, really good and would help me later on if I decided to go into a more elite role. But actually, day to day, they help guide practices, but not really. They're not really as relevant, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you could say, I'd imagine a lot of it, you say, is aimed at high performance rather than grassroots.
Well, yeah, and also
level.
like so my final master's bit, the bit that I'd done most of my work around, was talent identification and long-term athlete development. So like taking kids in at 5, what's the journey look like to elite? And specifically when it comes to talent ID, the idea of talent identification is actually taking a large pool of players and reducing it down to as few as possible to give them the funding, the extra training, all stuff like this. But there's so many things that are so irrelevant. Like, they could quit tomorrow. Like, you could start tracking their height, their weight. You could start doing so many different things. You could do all these press up tests, fitness tests, all this sort of stuff. But it makes no difference. Like if they give up when they're 16, all of that information and tracking is irrelevant. If you don't know what their home life's like, you don't know what, there's so many other things that actually make a huge impact of whether somebody's going to be successful or not. So, I had somebody asking me the other day, how much measuring of certain aspects do I do? How much, and I don't do any, because there's no real point of it long term, unless you know that person's going to stay in for the rest of their life, which you can't guarantee.
And do you think the current coaching pathway is easily accessible for people? So let me just give you context on that. So based around what you were saying earlier about trying to get more people involved, give them the option that judo could be a career choice.
Mm-hmm.
Then so that's all well and good, but then do you think the coaching pathway to then get those people who are, you say, listen, you could have a career as coach in judo, there's money to be made, you need to go and become a coach, you need to be qualified. Do you think that qualification process is easily accessible for people based on your experience of having gone through it yourself?
Okay, so I guess the way I'd answer that is currently, as things stand, to be able to run your own judo club, you need to be a level 2 judo coach in the UK. And if we take an example that most clubs are run on volunteer basis, and maybe they've got 50 members, 60 members, and they're charging £2 to £3 in a tin, which has been the way for such a long time. And from what I understand with British Judo, there's been no evidence to suggest that they've encouraged people to change, or at least I've not seen that. And yet to get your level 2, you have to do your level 1 first as a prerequisite. That's a couple of £100. And that's I think you do 2 days and then an assessment day with some portfolio work. The level 2, I think, is 2 weekends plus an assessment day. So that's 5 days that they've got to give up. It's also £500. It's also generally a distance away from wherever they live. So then there's like hotel costs, then there's travel costs, then there's food costs. So I think it's almost like they've set up this, there's this coaching avenue that you can go down, but how is that accessible to most people in most coaching roles in the country? It's different for me. If I'm offering someone 25 grand a year to be a coach, or 30 grand, or whatever it is, that £500 in those 5 days is not a lot. It's a bare minimum, really, isn't it? But for everybody else, that's actually quite a big task. And what is the long-term goal of that education? Like, what are they going to be able to do out there? How much of it is relevant for day-to-day coaching? And that's not something necessarily that I'm able to answer. I have thoughts on it, but I'm not going to go into those now. But does it sound like it's a sensible system? Would you be better off if you had, say, 10 to 20 bigger clubs that are able to almost do apprenticeship coaching roles where they're actually training their own coaches? Like at my club, I run my own coaching events for members to give them insight into what coaching is and how it works as a club, how you can learn things, and more relevant things around coaching, or what I'd say club coaching necessarily. So for me, it's not. I think it has to be rethought in the world that we're living in, I think. But I don't know what it's like everywhere else. I don't know what it's like in Oz or anything like that. So,
well, I was surprised. I've done my level 1 BGA, and then I moved to Australia sort of not long after doing that one. So I never got around to doing my level 2. And then I did the coaching qualification out here because obviously my BJA one was like relevant, but just to get the sort of the lay of the land out here. And I was really surprised at how basic it was here. And then, I know the people at the time. This was a couple of years back now, and I knew the people who ran New South Wales Judo. So I spoke to them about it, and they told me that this New South Wales is one of the best coaching programs out of any of the other states. And I was like, sort of shocked by that to some degree, because it was terrible. It was really bad, in my opinion, like even compared to like the level one. And it was just a sort of, we did no coaching. And we just basically sat around and did a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation about, you know, what it means to be a coach type of thing. But there was no actual, right, stand up and you now coach a little bit and we can see what you like. There was no work. It was literally just sit there for a day on a judo mat and look at a PowerPoint presentation. And, you know, one of the things when I said about, you know, I sort of said, like, it seems a bit ridiculous, you know, how like low. They're like, oh, well, yeah, we wanted to sort of, you know, make it a little bit more accessible to people. And I was like, well, give me a little bit too accessible. I mean, there's got to be a happy medium between just sitting there, you know, just having an attendance tick versus actually, you know, having to spend hundreds of pounds, invest several weekends of your life when you're already working and stuff like that, which is fine for someone like us, like you said, but to try and sell that to another person who's got a Monday to Friday.
Yeah, I guess as well is like, what is, I think sometimes like judo's for me is like a big contradiction. Like at the top end, they're taking in millions of pounds of government funding to support full-time programs, and you know they're trying to make sure that the coaching levels hit the UKCC criteria, like other governing bodies, and yet the clubs. Now, this is the thing, right? I don't want this to come across like I'm trying to bash the club, because it's just, I just feel like we need to push on now. But like the clubs are nowhere near that, most of them. And most clubs, like when I'm working with coaches, like one of the first things I sort of talk about is communication. And the judo is sort of the easy, should be the easy part. The actual judo techniques, that sort of stuff is really, really easy. But how do you get, so like a 5-year-old when they're really nervous, how do you get them from stepping through the door onto the mat without like totally freaking out and walking out the door? You know, how do you speak to them? What are the words that you should use? How do you greet them? How do you then keep them engaged? What are the little things that are going to make the biggest difference? And then once you've got that, that's the first hurdle done. Like I think there's a lot of focus on things that are almost irrelevant for 90% of coaches that are going to be working, you know, like nutrition, like fit. There's things that actually you're asked to learn and write about, but actually 90% of people won't need that information until much, much later on. So I just feel like, how do you get more people on the mat? How do you keep them safe? How do you talk to them? How do you look after them? What's the easiest way to teach judo? What is the system? So, for example, like there's not even a clear system of how do you make teaching judo really simple? Like, how do you make it as easy as possible? Like, we've got systems in place that for whether you're a 5-year-old or an adult doing judo, you learn it the same way. It's just taught slightly differently, but it all comes in. And the idea is to get you understanding it as quickly as possible. And as soon as you understand it, then you can add the different layers in of complexity.
So again, I mean, this comes back to our like, you know, overcomplicating things again. And, you know, the whole keep it simple, stupid. And, you know, do you think this is something that could be done sort of as a national, like coaching reform? And like you said, you mentioned about the apprenticeships, like coaching apprenticeships within the clubs. And do you think some like a giant shift like that could happen? I mean, like I don't want to obviously go down to like a political sort of you know, like criticism of any organization, but do you think, you know, like a reform like that could occur?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be rethought. Really, times have changed. I think we need to, and at no point here am I saying that I think things should be. What I'm not saying is that I think judo needs to be super easy. Everybody should win. There should be no development. Like, I just think we should rethink how it's taught. Like the amount of people that say, well, this is how the Japanese do it. This is judo is developed in like 1882. Like the way we learned then is completely different to what we know now. And actually, judo benefits from being a sport and learning different contexts of how we learn and stuff. And for me, it's just about understanding how people learn, understanding what the barriers are in the way of them learning. So are they nervous, anxious? If somebody, it's like if you can think back to when you're in school, if you didn't understand something, but somebody kept on saying the same thing over and over again, you'd put barriers up and you'd then stop thinking. And, how do we make learning as easy as possible for the people to get them started? How do we reduce any barrier? How do we just keep it so they can keep learning and buying into it until they get to the point where they absolutely love it, and then they're going to throw themselves into learning more? So for a simple example, like one of the first things we teach is just what a judo stance is. We play games and stuff, but once they know their judo stance, we then tell them the front leg does all the tripping up, the back leg is always the one that does the balancing and the supporting. So if they're learning a new technique, ouchigari, ko-uchigari, tai-toshi, they know the front leg is the one that's doing the tripping up. Now, we both know that's a lie, but it's not always the case. But they don't need to know that. Why on earth do they need to know Diashi Hara uses the back leg? Why do they need to know that if you want to do Koso Gak, you're most probably going to use it? Like, there's no need for them to know that. It makes no difference. But yet we go, oh no, the second technique in the syllabus is Diashi Hara. Well, for me, that's already making things a lot harder because you've asked them to use their front foot for the first technique and their back foot for the second technique. Well, how does that in a purely learning thing, how do we then structure that and make that easy? It's not. So for me, it's just about totally rethinking how people learn, how do we make it easier? And once they bought into it, then because you can still add action reaction, you can still add all of the principles of judo to those basic ideas, but add the bits that actually contradict what we're teaching at the beginning, add those later on when they can understand, when they're not as nervous, when they're not as, thinking, blimey, they've got all these different Japanese words. They've got all these funny movements. Someone's trying to throw me to the ground and keep me there. We've just got to simplify it.
Something I realized with coaching the kids, I started off trying to teach them different techniques and we'd go through, and I like to always kept a bit of continuity from session to session. So, we're going over and revising things. We got to a point where I was like, well, what other throws can I show these kids, and you look at the Gokyo, I think you're relatively restricted in terms of, what the kids are physically able to do. I was like, well, I'm going to stop showing them different throws. I'm just going to keep showing them the same throws from different scenarios and different entries, or not entries, but different sort of, styles of training. So moving uchikomi and different ways of doing it forwards, backwards, but always just keep the throw the same. And, kept that as a fixed point instead of changing the throw all the time. Because I'm going to see some of the kids were just getting confused by the different, like you say, the different, okay, well, this throw we're doing this, but then that throw we're completely changing that. We're doing something else. And I was like, I think I'm losing some of them here.
Well, and it's a mind for coaching, such a mind. And the problem is there's so much that you could teach. And I think the key with coaching is actually knowing what you shouldn't teach and knowing like what not to bother doing. So, we want kids to become empowered and confident as quickly as possible. And so we'll go through, and we're talking like even with the 5-year-olds, we'll do this. Like once they're on the mat, you do your break forwards, your basic movement, you get all them going. You teach them that whichever hand you write with grabs the lapel, the other hand grabs the sleeve, and whichever hand grabs the lapel, that foot goes forwards. So now you've got your judo grip, your judo stance. You then tell them the front leg's always the leg that trips them up, and you can do. So we would do some demonstrations of different techniques. We wouldn't tell them what techniques they are, but just give them some ideas. And then you go, all right, well, we want you to go away and invent your own judo technique. And 9 times out of 10, the kids will just copy what you've just done and they'll go. But once you get them back and you go, right, can you show me a judo throw? The majority of the kids will just walk out, show you a throw, which will look like a technique that we've already, we would know, recognize as a technique. And they've created that. As far as they're concerned, they've just nailed judo. They understand it. And now they're on a position where you're now trying to teach kids that actually think, well, I know how to do this. I can do this and you just get so much more buy-in. It's such a simple little thing that you can do to empower the kids straight away. And now they want to learn a bit more about judo. Same with the hold downs. All you need to do is tell them they need to have their back on the floor and don't let your legs get trapped. Keep them there. You know, the kids they want to learn. They want to do it. They want to have an explore. So I think actually a couple of little restraints and then let them go and let them have a go. And you just make sure that they're not going to do anything dangerous. And they will, you know, kids don't generally, you know, they're generally pretty good, and they'll get on with it. And you've now got a class that can do 3 or 4 different techniques because they've got an idea of what the basic principle is and how to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, it's funny you said about the hold downs and, you know, not overcomplicating. It's during the lockdown last year, and I was doing some of the Zoom sessions. I was doing, you know, trying to think of things to do. So, you know, I was going through the different hold downs, and they're doing on the judo dummies, and, you know, you go from Kazakhstan to Kazuri to, you know, and you'd work your way around. And we came back, and it was funny because the kids that had done the Zoom sessions had become so stuck in this routine of like Keza to Kazuri, you know, this year, that they'd, you know, we do some transition work, and they'd be in a hold down, and they'd be like, no, I've got to go to Kazakhstan because that's the first one. And they'd like let go of something to then move to, you know, the first point in this routine. I was like, oh, you know, I accidentally built in this bad habit.
Well, it's not. I mean, repetition, you know, it's just the times were difficult, wasn't it? And we are not victims, but what I'm finding is we're having to really question everything that we've ever learned, and we're having to look at it like, the one thing that really irritates me is when I hear people say, well, this is how I was always taught. This is how, you know, we've got to think, we've got to be better than that. We've got to push ourselves, especially if we're doing this as a job. You know, well, why do we teach like that? Like, I know the way I teach is 100% different to however I was taught when I was younger. And the systems that I've got in now are purely in there because it makes sense on a learning perspective, on a development perspective. But I'm also very quick, if I think something's not right, to try and change it and make it a bit better. And I might not know how to do it straight away, but I'll then go out and try and find it, and I'll ask better coaches. I'll just try and find as much information as I can to do that better. But I think we've got to, I don't think, especially as like our inspiration on learning judo, how to do judo, I don't think should be coming from Japan, Korea. Like, it's culturally so far removed. So we need to be thinking differently about how we learn, how we teach, and going from there.
Yeah, it was when I think it might have been this second or third time I went to Japan. I was at the Kodokan, and I was staying there, and I went upstairs to watch one of the sessions, and there was these kids on, and I don't know how old they were, but they looked young, like 5 or 6, and they were. It must have been a good. I got bored and left, but for a good half an hour, they were just hooking in for ouchigari and hopping across the mat with a leg hooked in, and then the other kid would hook in and they'd hop back. And they were just up and down the mat, like a line of them. There was like 20, 30 kids on the mat. And they were just up and down, up and down. And I was just, I mean, like I said, I got bored. I just don't know how they did it, right? But again, it's just a different culture, different way of doing things. And I couldn't teach that. I'd get bored trying to teach something like that. Like you say, it sort of kills me softly a little bit when people say, oh, well, they do this in Japan, they do that in Japan, they do this, the other. And it's just like, well,
but also, we need to
create our own identity as well as judoka.
But what we don't know is what's the wastage. Okay, so for example, we know in this country football's massive. All right, so millions of kids want to be Premier League football stars, but there's so many kids that don't make it. All right, what is the wastage over there? We know from science that actually you suffer with burnout if you do things over and over again repetitively. You know, for young kids, you can get overuse injuries, you can get bored. Like, there's so many things that we understand through that style of training that's not good. What's the way? We don't ever think about, well, how many kids or how many people are worse off from that training, because we only see the Olympic champions. So as a society, you then have to think about, right, if we're going to do that as a country, we would have to go, right, we're prepared to ruin the experience of 90% of people doing judo. we would have to accept that there's going to be lots of injuries, lots of burnout, lots of fatigue, potential mental disruption. Let's forget about the fact that culturally it wouldn't work anyway. Parents would just pull their kids out. But let's say, for example, we could do that. As coaches, we would have to agree that that's a good thing to do. And that's just madness to me.
Yeah, I think people saying is just sort of, I don't know, they have this view of it being a bit of this utopia of judo.
Yeah, they're only seeing the Olympic medals, aren't they? They're not seeing of everything else that will go into that system.
Yeah. I know a few people out here because being relatively close in comparison to the UK to Japan, it's very, very prevalent, that sort of, we got to do judo like the Japanese, and it's got to be, like in this particular way. And, I know a few people that started judo, they were Australian and they moved to Japan and started judo in Japan. And, they're not even sold on the idea. They come back and they talk about it and it's like, well, you can tell it's the people that have never been to Japan and done judo that really think that quite a lot of the time.
But you know what, as well, the thing I love about judo is that anything can work. Like, you look at people like Kovacs or Boras or, like all these unorthodox styles of judo, or like the Iranian boy who's gone to Mongolia. Like, judo is so good to me because as a coach, I love the complexity of the different styles, the way that any judo system can work, but you've got to find one that culturally sits within your identity as well. So the fact that we would be looking at Japan seems madness. Like, the fairer comparisons are what's France doing, what's Germany doing, what's Belgium doing, what's Holland doing, because physically and culturally, we're a lot more in line. Now, we're not exactly the same as them. But that, for me, is how we need to address it. And we need to find systems that work for us. We need to create our own British identity. Everybody goes on about back in the day how Britain used to be amazing at nail-waza. Well, that could be one of our identities. It could be we're really good at gripping. It could be that, because just being good at judo isn't good enough to make it. You have to have that desire, that want, that will to be good. And you need to be in a position and given the opportunities to do it.
Just like to go back to your comments earlier about your club, and you were saying you've recently put up a position, not full-time paid position, for a judo coach.
Mm-hmm.
What else is on the cards for you and your club?
Oh, it's just, have we got enough time in the day? We're developing. So for us, coaches, we're trying to get more coaches on board. We want to go to a bigger dojo. We want to expand out into other areas. There's ideas about franchising that we're sort of looking at. We're building the judo coach, which is obviously what most people would have seen me on, doing bits and pieces on the judo coach. So we're building out that. We're getting a new website built for that, which is based more around, so they will have judo instructionals, but it will be looking at coaching principle, like working on both sides and club management and stuff. So we want to build that side out, start helping clubs and coaches learn how to do what we do. But yeah, I think our first target, we're nearly at 500 members, which was something that we were really keen on as a target to get to. We should get there by May, and then it'll be 1,000 members, but we will need to employ some people. But yeah, just for us, it's about getting more kids involved in judo, more adults involved in judo, keep pushing what we think is possible and just helping change. I think that's the thing. Everything that I say comes from a passion of wanting judo to be the number one martial art, the number one sport in the UK. Obviously it's never going to take football, but I want it to be right up there. I want more people to do judo. I want British judo to be able to produce Olympic champions. And I feel like this is part of the journey. I feel like we need to get our foundation sorted. Once we've got a really solid foundation, everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can question your passion. I feel as though it's come across. It's definitely come across to me throughout this conversation. I feel as though you've been holding back a little bit.
Well, it's difficult. One of those things when I get going, because I'm so passionate about it, because I really want to do stuff and I want to change things up. Like, I get very conscious of the fact that actually I go on a little bit. So
no, it's good. It's good. Like I said, I think the sport needs more people at this end pushing on, like you say, a lot of the focus is on the high performance, and he's looking at these athletes that are pushing on for Olympic medals, which is obviously an important part of it. But then it's the others like yourself with that passion that's going to drive at the other
But
end.
Also, the thought is, like, where do these people come from? Like, I always just think judo would be in a much better place, especially in Britain, if we had more people involved. Like, at the moment, we don't particularly have a men's section. We have a women's section, and you're just sort of scratching it. They're not in control of where people are coming from. For me, if there's a supply issue, you've got to go to the source, and the source is 5 years old, 3 years old, like getting kids through the door. So for me to fix the performance we've got good coaches. I 100% believe that. We've got plenty of people that want to do that work, but not enough people actually trying to get people through the door. And it's not a quick fix either, because it's going to take years for these people to grow and go through but if we really want judo to improve, we've got to go at the source. We've got to look at how do we get more people involved in judo? And that, for me, is where we'll start seeing long-term change.
Yeah, the more people are doing it, the more potential we have for people to come through that are going to be Olympic champions. If you've got a bigger, well, that would be where the whole, going back to the Japanese thing, you look at the sheer number of people that they have doing judo. Like you say, they've got a huge drop-off, but they've got a massive talent pool to pick from. And the same would be said of a lot like France. France would be another country that would have like a huge number of people to go, okay, well, they have a lot of depth within the weight groups, which is something, like you say, we definitely don't have it in Australia, but it's not something that they have in the UK either.
But also as well, like there's so many things that people say, oh, we should have a judo league in this country. We should have this. Clubs try and come together to do randouris. And I just think, because as well in Great Britain, it's such a small country. If you had 20 clubs that all had 1,000 members each, you wouldn't need to go anywhere else for training. You could have your training at your club. You could have your randori sessions at your club. You could set up as many leagues as you wanted with that. Then everything then filters down. So I just feel like many of the issues, the things that people would like fixed, are solved from having more people in your clubs. And for me, it's not the school system, because there's a big school system over here as well, because that's just, you're going in, providing enough school activity. It's about getting them into your clubs where they're making that commitment after school to drive to your club, to go and train at your dojo. I think they're the things that will make the big difference in the long run.
Yeah, getting them through the door and then getting them to stay interested.
Yeah, which is easy because judo's so good. Judo is just so good. Like from whatever aspect, self-defense, fitness, strength, confidence, but helping with behavior, it ticks so many boxes. And as a martial artist, around building education and stuff, everything that if you were trying to design like something that's really good for school kids and for schools, and judo's pretty much up there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that was the thing that sort of attracted me the most as a kid as well. It was sort of where, we went by, like I said earlier, just because, it was the judo club in my town, somewhere to go and wrestle. And then for me, that variety and the challenge and the dynamic nature of the sport is what kept me. I had no idea what judo was before I went. I was just like, all right, let's go. And for me, as a hyperactive 9-year-old, having the ability to wrestle and fight, but then the amount of variety of different techniques that the sport has to offer. So I used to swim, and that was boring. I've been running. I used to run as a kid, cross country. That was boring after a while. It's just one foot in front of the other, right? What else did I do?
Yeah.
Field hockey. Did a bit of like soccer, I've been in Australia for a while. Bit of football.
Jeez, I can't believe you just said that.
I know. I'm
I can't believe that you've turned full Australian. I'm going to tell Brian as well.
Well, I don't have an Australian passport. That was yeah. Actually, I've already had that conversation with him. So at Christmas, he told me off already for that one. But yeah, like you say, there's just so much depth to the sport. Just need to allow other people to experience that and find that out for themselves.
As I said, we will get there. I think, there's a lot of positive stuff going on now. I think with people have started to become a little bit more adept with online. Things are changing. I'm definitely going to be pushing as much as I can to create change, to change people's just what people think are possible. Like in Scotland, there's 3 or 4 massive clubs up there. We're talking sort of 6, 7, 800 members up there. It can happen. Like if it can work in Scotland, it can work in England. If it can work in England, I just 100% believe that that's the way we've got to go.
Yeah, I said the exact same thing, but with Australia. I said if it can work in Scotland, it can work in Australia. No, I think the work you're doing is great. I've followed your stuff, and it's funny you said about the lockdown being, you sort of reset and pushed on hard in terms of your education, and tried to make the most of that situation. And for myself, that's where the Judo Way of Life really sort of grew from, was the first lockdown, and thinking, right, well, I need to do something about this. What can I do to make some money and live, and incorporate the thing that I love the most into that. So,
well, that's it as well. That's what amazes me as well, isn't it? You are a professional in judo. Like, it's the same as, could you imagine someone going to university, spending all those years studying, and then leaving university, and then somebody saying, well, hang on a minute, you shouldn't make any money from that. I know you're an expert. I know you've done, those years of medical school, whatever, but you need to just go and set up a club now, and, you don't make any money. You need to do something else. That's what you're an expert at what you do, and you should be paid for the skills that you can offer and you can deliver, and the value you can create as a professional.
Yeah, and that was, to be honest with you, that was like a shift for me as well. I had to shift it, make that, internalize that myself. When I first started doing the coaching, and it was me seeing the value in what I did, and expressing that to others as well, who saw the value in it. But that was a little bit of a shift initially for myself, in terms of going, okay, well, no, like, no longer an amateur, let's do this as a professional. And that was after 20 odd years of doing the sport. So
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Madness. All right, listen, I think we should wrap it up there. It's 10:30 here at night, and I'm starting to get a bit tired. I can feel my brain sort of slowly melting. And then I'm up at 5 a.m. to do some more coaching. So, I've really enjoyed that. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk. As I say, I know we've been trying to tee this up for a year now, and I'm really glad we got to have this conversation. I think it's been really good. I hope it inspires other people that listen to it, and gives them the chance to, give them the see, brains turn to mush. Give them the drive to pursue judo as a career themselves.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks for having me on, bud. It's been good to talk.